Stephen Carter here, CEO for Stress Solutions, LLC. Welcome to our special series on creating inner harmony. You are about to join us with a conversation I had with Dr. Jed Diamond. Jed is a licensed therapist. He's worked in the field of men's issues, specifically anger management and couples counseling. He's worked in that field for more than 50 years, and he brings to our conversation some excellent guidance on how to create harmony within the family, with a spouse, with family members, as we continue this lockdown with the COVID-19. We have the COVID-19 lockdown problem, and that has led to an increase in incidents of domestic violence. We certainly want to offer guidance on how to prevent that, reduce that risk. But the guidance that we're getting from Jed is excellent guidance no matter where we are in the future. We can have this pandemic, this lockdown, well behind us, and the nuggets of information, the guidance that Jed gives us is golden. Jed is a licensed psychotherapist. He holds a Ph.D. in international health, a master's degree in social work. Quote, "My passion is to help men and their families do three things. 1, live a fully authentic life. 2, love deeply and well. And 3, make a positive difference in the world. I help women understand why men feel what they feel and do what they do so that they can have the most loving and connecting relationship with the men in their lives. For 50 years, I've been a pioneer in the field of gender reconciliation, energy healing, and prevention of sexual and relationship violence. And indeed, that is our focus for this conversation. My work has been featured in major newspapers throughout the United States, including the New York Times, Boston Globe, Wall Street Journal, Los Angeles Times, USA Today. He's been on more than 1,000 radio and TV programs, including The View with Barbara Walters, Good Morning America, Today Show, Anderson Cooper, CBS, NBC, Fox. He is truly an expert in the field of relationships. So without any further delay, let's join our conversation with Dr. Jed Diamond. We have with us Dr. Jed Diamond, a couples counselor, researcher, and expert on men's issues. Welcome, Jed, to the show.
It's good to be with you.
Thank you. Jed, as we're speaking, we are in whatever number of weeks we have been in COVID-19 lockdown. We have seen some significant indicators for mental health challenges. Families have been together for, in some cases, multiple weeks and months. We've seen some indication that domestic violence is an increasing problem. So as we chat today, I would like to focus on three things. First, how can we navigate the days, the weeks, the months of way too much togetherness in some cases? And how can we do that in a comfortable, safe way? Secondly, what are some of the warning signs that would suggest that one or more family member is going to experience an elevated safety risk from a male, a female, from anyone else in the family, really? And then third, if you would, I would love for you to share some of your tools and resources to promote relationship harmony. And that's not only just in this COVID-19 shutdown, but you have an amazing array of tools that you've developed over your working life, your professional life, that is really, really impressive. So let me begin before we dive into those three areas. Just a quick question. When did you know that men's issues, couples counseling were going to be such an important part of your life's work?
Well, the most clear wake up call that I got was with the birth of our first son, which was November 21st, 1969. And when I held Jamal in my hands for the first time, I made a promise to him that I would be a different kind of father than my father was able to be for me, and to do everything I could to create a world where families were healthy, were joyous, were together, and supportive of each other and the children. So I've really been doing this work for 50 years, if not more. And I think many of the people that I know I work with have a personal, something that motivates us personally. Could be our own healing, some of the things that happened to us as children growing up, or something that was reimagined or re-triggered through the birth of our children or other happenings. But this one still is very alive for me to pass on what I've learned to both my own children and now my grandchildren, as well as all the people in the world that really, I think, want to have good relationships, want to have good families, but often the stresses and strains of life can trigger everything that you described, from abuse to, violence to just depression and unhappiness. And all of these things can be prevented and treated if we understand them.
What, from given that this lockdown is not going to last forever, while we're specifically speaking within the context of a very unusual set of circumstances, but I know your tools and your work is focused on a much broader way of creating harmony within families. But specifically, and I do want to touch on those, specifically for now, for those who are watching this video or who are listening to this in an audio podcast, what advice would you give to family members to help keep the waters as calm as possible as we navigate through this period?
Well, what I notice is that there are really two groups of people that are under stress with the the virus itself, which people generates obviously fear, worry. Am I going to get it? Is somebody that I know going to get it? Are we going to end up in a hospital without a respirator? Or if we have a respirator, are we going to, die because, our lungs shut down? So there's a really high level of fear that's affecting everybody. But there's also a group of people who have had challenges in the past, whether they were problems with domestic violence, both if you were somebody who engaged in violent activities, if you were somebody who had been affected by violence or by anger or difficulty in relationships, both in your adult relationships or in your family relationships growing up, you're at increased risk, clearly. And so there's a group of people who the lockdown is adding to stresses that have been there in the past. So it's triggering things like PTSD and re-remembering or getting triggered by old experiences. But then there's people who have had a pretty good, pretty healthy life up until now, who sometimes for the first time are being affected by, again, not only the virus itself, but the being locked up. And I think humans are not meant to be locked up. We like to move. We like to travel. We like to, get out in the sunshine. We like to go to the beach. And now, not only many of us can't do that, but we're at home with our partners sometimes with our children who would normally be in school or who would normally be out playing with their friends. So it's kind of like a pressure cooker for many of us that gets more and more intense through the weeks. I know as I've felt it myself and talked to people in my community and my clients, the first week seemed like a little vacation. Oh, great, I don't have to work, I could be home, except I work at home, as do a few other people. But then the second week, it's like, okay, let's get on with it, and you get a little more antsy. By the third week, people are feeling some real added tension. And by the fourth week, and for some now into the fifth or sixth week, the pressure is really building up, and people are really, starting to fray at the edges. I see couples in my counseling practice of both groups, those that have had problems in the past and are now getting more problems and it's re-triggering, or people that have not had problems but are finding it for the first time. We had in my small town, we only have 5,000 people in my town, a couple of weeks ago, a murder of a man killing his wife, had a history of domestic violence and had never gotten, this out of hand, but with the added pressure, they got in a fight and he ended up, hitting her hard enough to kill her. That's unusual. There's not, those kinds of things, but the pressures and the anger and the rage and the out of control behavior is not unusual, unfortunately. And we're seeing more of this in our communities. And there are things we have to pay attention to, and there are things we have to hopefully do everything we can to prevent this kind of outcome from happening in any of our families.
What suggestions would you give to family members as far as how to keep calm? What are some of the key things that each of us can do in a relationship to keep the stress level down and reduce the risk for explosive behaviors by other people?
Well, there's a number of things that I do in my family, and I recommend for other people. The first one is being able to take care of our own anxieties and fears, because we all have them. So part of it is, I do meditations every day, everything from small, quick, just taking a deep breath and closing my eyes for a moment and letting it out, to, more long meditations where, I just practice relaxation. Another thing that I do that I recommend to people, it seems like we're all washing our hands more than we ever have in our lives. And I have a little mantra that I learned from an online woman who was trying to teach songs to her children since they were locked up. She was a singer. And so the song went like this. Every little cell in my body is happy. Every little cell in my body is well. I'm so glad every little cell in my body is happy and well. And she just repeated that over and over. And it was a little ditty that she taught her two kids at home. Well, what I find is every time I wash my hands, right, to remind myself you should wash them thoroughly, I would just repeat the little mantra. Every little cell in my body is happy. Every little cell in my body is well. I'm so glad every little cell in my body is happy and well. And it's a little mantra that just calms us. It can relax us, and it can remind us that, hey, whatever's going on out there, I have some control over how I deal with that. So that's another thing I do. Third thing is, I think we have to recognize that couples are having increased stresses. So often we're having stresses not only from fears of the virus, but we have economic stresses. People are out of work. They're wondering, am I going to ever get back to work? Some people are really, very concerned about, am I going to be able to feed my family? And I see this happening and stressing particularly men, although it stresses women as well. But men, I think, have that long time built in uh, feeling that it's my job to be the breadwinner. And so there's this tension of I should be out there, I should be supporting my family. And when that doesn't happen, often men tend to get more irritable and angry. I wrote a book called The Irritable Male Syndrome, where I talked about the kind of irritability and anger that builds up. So I try to work particularly with men and offer to men both the recognition of the feelings that build up in us and the desire that we all need to be able to dissipate that. The final thing I do and I tell people is men particularly, but women as well, we're meant to be physically active when we're afraid. That's built into animals, it's built into humans. We're built for fight or flight. So when we're afraid, we're either going to fight it physically or we're going to run away. And now we can't fight the virus. It's, you can't punch it out, which many of us would like to do. But the feelings, the energy, the chemicals build up in our body. So I tell people you need to exercise. I exercise 2 or 3 times a day. I do push-ups in the morning. I do stretching exercises. All of us can go out and walk. I go, in my neighborhood, I go out and walk 2 or 3 times a day. So I recommend, particularly for guys, we need to physically dissipate that fight or flight anger energy. Otherwise, we tend to take it out on the people that are closest to us, and we don't want that. So there's some of the immediate tools that I use and that I recommend to my clients and to your audience that are listening and watching this today.
Great. Very cogent suggestions for sure. From a relationship point of view, what, in your experience with couples counseling, what are some of the early signs in a relationship that typically the male, it can possibly be the female as well, but typically it's the male who is the aggressor. What are some of the early signs before a partner is struck or hit or he lashes out physically? Are there some kind of steps or indicators that things are going in that direction? And if there are, what are those and what could a partner do to kind of deal with that before it gets very serious?
Yeah, I mentioned this book that I wrote called The Irritable Male Syndrome. As part of the research for that, I developed a 50-question questionnaire to assess levels of irritability and anger so that we could understand what was going on early before it ended in violence. So as part of the research, I interviewed about 500 men and 500 women who took the quiz. Afterwards, it seemed like it was so popular that people really found it helpful, both women concerned about the men in their lives and men concerned about their own irritability and anger. So I left it up and available. It's online now. People can take the quiz. It's at imsquiz.com, or you can find it on my website at Men Alive. And it's got 50 questions that you fill out, symptoms that indicate, am I irritable? Am I feeling withdrawn? Am I feeling antsy? Am I feeling anxious? There's a whole number of early warning signs that people can tune into. And then when you take the quiz, it scores it for you and tells you, is it a mild? Is this something that you should just notice and keep your eye on? Is it something that's of concern, or is it something that you need to deal with right away? So it's been a very, very helpful tool for people to tune in to these early signs. So I tell people basically you're going to be noticing a whole group of feelings, and you may not be very conversant with feelings. Men tend to not be as tuned into their feelings, to be able to put words to them, but we all feel them. And you can see them in tension in your face, in your shoulders, in your, clenching your jaw with your fists, uh, balling your fists in just frustration. That's another feeling that seems to be an early warning sign, is frustration. Another one is anxiety, just that free floating worry that goes on. So if you can tune into those, either whoever's feeling it, whoever's seeing it, and the first thing, again, I do is take a deep breath. Our breath is part of the healing process. There's a number of meditations, healing techniques that just get down to breath. We all breathe. We're all going to be aware of our breath. So just take a deep breath, tuning into the feeling, what's going on with me, and then being able to talk about it, being able to say, hey, man, I know I kind of got irritated with you. I'm just feeling really tense today. I'm worried about, work, or I'm worried about when is this ever going to end? Are we ever going to get out? Or the kids are driving me nuts. They've been home and so being able to talk about it before it erupts, or more tools that people can use and practice. But let's face it, it isn't easy. And if you've had any of these symptoms in your previous life, it's going to be harder, and you need to pay more attention.
So you have got just an absolutely spot on resource on your blog post or on your blog site, on your website. Can your relationship survive this much togetherness? 7 things you must do now. So for those who are watching this or hearing this on the podcast version, I encourage you to visit Jed's website. And what is that again, Jed?
Yeah, it's Men Alive, menalive.com. And I write an article every day or every week. It seems like every day. So I'm working on something every day. And while the COVID crisis is going on, I'm posting them. They're available for free. You can just come and read them. If you want to get notified, you can sign up for my mailing list. There's a number of free articles. There's free books that I'm offering, low cost. We got time at home to read, so you can read my ebook on irritable male syndrome. There's a lot of resources, as you point out, on the website, including the article you mentioned that really hones in on relationships. And here are the things that you need to be aware of, and here are the things you can do right away, because nobody wants to, have the tension of these times be taken out on our spouses or our children or our friends or ourselves, because what doesn't often get expressed in anger outwardly often gets turned inside into depression and feeling of lethargy and down, or feeling of just, frustration and closeness that can cause internal pain and suffering that, in extremes can lead to people feeling hopeless and helpless and just not able to do anything.
I know from time to time, as we were speaking earlier, you use or recommend an array of tools called energy psychology methods or energy method tools. Are there 1 or 2 that you find are most useful, most valuable for those who are open to applying these sorts of interventions for themselves?
Yeah, I do. I use these again on myself. There's a technique that I've learned a number of years ago, goes under various names, but EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique, or it's called tapping, where we know that being able to tune into these energy meridians. Some people have had experience with acupuncture. It was kind of how I got introduced to EFT. I have an aversion to needles, even the very thin, painless needles that are used for acupuncture. And kind of jokingly, I went to my acupuncturist, said years ago, is there something like this that I could get that doesn't have needles? And she said, well, I've heard of this thing that's called tapping that, taps into those energy systems, but don't use needles. And I learned about it, found out, and for me, I had a chronic shoulder dislocation and pain that had been with me for years and years. And using EFT, I was able to totally heal the pain of that, which surprised me, and do it in a fairly short number of sessions. So that's one of the techniques I use. And I have a special group of techniques that I use with couples that uses kind of the energies that we all have to be able to not only communicate better in words, but to help couples communicate non-verbally, which men particularly like, because there's often cases where women will say, well, tell me how you feel. I want to know, let it out. Tell me. And guys often don't know how to do that. They don't know how to put feelings into words, or are not easily expressive. So I have a set of tools that are available for couples to work through. And there's a book. I'm a writer, so I'll be honest, the way I learn things that I think would be helpful to me or my clients is I go study them and then I write a book. And I wrote a book called Energy Healing for Men. There's 4 techniques that I recommend. A couple of them are the EFT and the energy relationship work. But they're available again on my website, or you can get them in your local bookstore. So I think it's a good time. I think if there's anything good about the lockdown, it gives us a chance to do some internal healing, which I think we all have to do. It gives us some opportunity to do some relationship healing, which we all, I think, have a need to do. And it gives us a chance to just reflect on our lives of where am I in my life? There's a break, a kind of a reboot, an opportunity to relook at things and hopefully come out of this with some renewed purpose, some renewed energy, maybe some new directions that we want to go, and maybe a much more healed relationship with ourselves and a much more healed and healthy relationship with our partners.
Very, very well said, Jed. As we wrap up, is there anything that we've missed that you would like to share with those who are listening to or seeing this conversation?
Well, I think one thing that as I said, I kind of specialize in working with men and their families. So, I talk with women a lot, but often they're around issues with the man in their life. And I think one of the real hidden, I wrote an article called The Hidden Mental Health Pandemic. So we're very aware, you see statistics on every news broadcast of how many cases worldwide, how many cases in the US, how many have died. But what we're experiencing is the stress around this, both the stress of the fears and anxieties around the illness, but also the stresses of the life changes we're going through. I think this is going to last probably longer than the pandemic itself, which may last 18 months, 2 years. We really don't know when, we're finally going to get a vaccine. And, I have a Ph.D. in international health, and I studied pandemics and viruses. One of the things we know about viruses is they change very, very fast. So what may be a cure, if we get one on this, or a vaccine, you could the next year have a whole different strain. We see that with influenza, which is yearly, and flu season, we all know about that. And sometime you get a an injection of a vaccine. It's available, and sometimes it doesn't work, and sometimes it changes, and you have a new one every year. So I think we're going to have to be aware of a certain degree of emotional stress that's going to be with us a long time. And one of the things that's going to affect a huge number of people is right now is our economic stress. And I'm afraid that the economic stress is going to go on for a long time and is going to impact men disproportionately, in that men, even though women have as much need often for economic security and to take care of their families, in a sense, men take it personally in a way that not all women do. That somehow, if I can't do this, there's something the matter with me. And that, I think, is going to lead to more depression, more emotional breakdowns. And hopefully, it's part of what I'm doing through my treatments, my work, my client work, my writing, to try to alert people not only to what you need to do now, but to be able to prepare yourself for what may be coming in 6 months, in a year, 2, 3, 5 years. So this is a good time to prepare in all kinds of ways. This is a good time to get your immune system as healthy as it can, to heal childhood wounds from the past, to heal the abusive relationship you may have grown up in, the abuse that may be going on in your own life now. So this is a healing time on many, many different levels. And I'm glad to be able to share with your audience some of the things that I know and that I'm working on in my own life, and hopefully sharing with you that you all can learn and build more into your own life for now and in the many months and years in the future that we're looking forward to.
Well put, Jed, and I think absolutely on target in each of those points, each of those thoughts. If people want to get in touch with you, either for counseling or to get your resources, what's the best way for those for people to find you?
Sure. They can write me directly an email to Jed, Jed, at menalive.com. For those that do, I'm sending that article that you mentioned that helps specifically with couples. If anybody would like a free copy of that you can just have if you email me and mention the show or how you heard about this, and mention in the subject line couples article, I'll send that out to you. And then you can see on my website at menalive.com a whole lot of resources that are available to anybody that would like to check them out, to read, get books, anything that, my goal is to share what I know and to help as many people as I can.
Well, you certainly have done that over the years and years and years that you've been working in this field. Jed, it's been a real pleasure. I thank you. Best of luck to you ongoing, and blessings to you and your loved ones.
Thank you so much.